Thank you to everybody for being here today. Michael is the Director of Impact Investing at the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation here at Georgetown. He's also the Senior Advisor to the U.S. National Advisory Board on Impact Investing, which is the U.S.'s arm of the Global Task Force on Impact Investing. He was also recently the Senior Fellow at encore.org, working to develop social innovation and entrepreneurship strategy and engagement, as well as policies and strategic partnerships to support the Encore social enterprise. He's also the principal of Monolith Strategic, which supports and accelerates startups in the media and technology sectors in marketing analysis, product focus, and strategic partnerships. Previously, Michael served as the Associate Administrator of the Office of Entrepreneurial Development at the U.S. Small Business Administration, where he was responsible for overseeing the agency's nationwide counseling, training resources, and programs for America's entrepreneurs, as well as the agency's Regional Innovation Clusters program. The agency counsels and trains over 1 million small businesses a year, helping to provide a pipeline of billions of dollars in capital and helping start tens of thousands of job-creating new businesses each year. Michael also served as the Small Business Administration's Deputy General Counsel. And before joining the agency, Michael was the principal of a law practice which represented a diverse range of small business entrepreneurs, private equity investors, technology developers, and content creators. So we're happy to have you today.
That's quite a mouthful.
It is.
Thank you for that introduction. Well, we have such an intimate group today. I think we can actually start by introducing ourselves. So we can probably go around the table. Now that everybody knows who I am, what I've done.
I'm Doug. I'm a first year MBA student here at Georgetown.
I'm Rayanne. I'm a EP 15, so I graduated this year. I work full-time at Beeck.
I'm Kurt Holtheimer. I'm in the evening program also, class of 2016, and I'm with Georgetown as well, in the Department of Anthropology.
I'm Hallie Lissick. I'm the business manager for the School of Foreign Service Dean's Office, so we're just upstairs from here. And I'm an EP 16 student.
My name is Ben Loring. I work at the Center for Eurasian Russian and East European Studies, which is also on the first floor of the ICC, down the hall from you, and which is a part of the School of Foreign Service here at Georgetown. I'm also an EP60.
I'm Megan. I am a first year MBA student.
I'm Shri. I'm a first year MBA student, full time.
Hi, my name is Surbi. I'm a first year MBA student. Thank you for your time.
Michael Kelly, first year MBA as well. I'm interested in entrepreneurship here in DC, working for a VC firm this summer, so I want to hear more about the social side.
Which firm, by the way?
Core Capital.
Yeah.
You know me.
And you.
Natalia Raycagao.
Okay.
I'm the Associate Director of the Global Social Enterprise Initiative.
Yes. And I assume all of you know each other. So, okay. First of all, thank you for letting me come and speak. Glenn and I ran into each other at an event now a couple of months ago, and we're just talking about the fact that it's sometimes kind of hard to decode when you're attending classes in one of the schools what's going on with the centers that are in other parts of the campus. I think it's one of the issues that we have around Georgetown generally. The Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, which is the full title, resides in the provost's office, and it physically sits over in ICC. So it's down on the first floor of ICC, just down that way over there. And the idea of the center, it was formed about 1.5 years ago, and the idea of the center is that it would act as a hub for social innovation, both outward-facing and inward-facing. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. That would be cross-campus and interdisciplinary, so that students from the business school could participate, as well as students from the SFS, from any of the undergraduate programs, including the college and the various graduate programs around campus. I know that, especially in a place like Georgetown, there are so many things going on that it's just impossible to know everything else going on in the business school, let alone what's going on elsewhere around the campus. So that's the basic idea. What does the center do? The center has really two missions. As I said, one outward-facing and one inward-facing. The outward-facing mission is to participate in policy activity, engagement in the DC policymaking community, and engagement with essentially the impact investing community around key issues that drive social innovation. And for us, that basically shows up as government innovation, new ways to think about how government can more effectively spend taxpayer dollars, impact investing, broadly written, including policy initiatives for not just catalyzing impact investing, but getting out of the way of impact investing and allowing more transactions to take place. It includes transaction education, essentially, and training for those who are interested in participating in impact investing, who need a trusted source for information, and who don't currently have anywhere to go and can't afford consulting firms to be their main source of entry. In particular, we're focused on providing that for state and local government entities that want to participate in catalyzing impact transactions in their local jurisdictions but don't know where to start. So kind of government and innovation, impact investing generally, and engagement with policymakers around all of the issues that you've been hearing about around impact investing, which are capital accumulation, social enterprise development, social enterprise form, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, both here in DC and at the state and local level. So that's kind of the outward-facing body of activity. That means that we are engaging on a regular basis with venture firms, with nonprofits that are in the impact space, with those who are working on capacity development for social enterprises, and with foundations and others who are engaged in trying to deal with policymakers and who need somebody who understands DC and how to navigate the DC space. As part of that, we engage in a number of convenings on kind of an ongoing basis here in DC and elsewhere. Tomorrow, I don't know how many of you are attending, but we have a conference in combination with Milan and the Center for Women in Peace Studies and the Halcyon Incubator on Women Leading Disruptive Innovations over at the Halcyon House, which is just off of campus. If you haven't already joined up, it's too late because it's wildly oversubscribed, I'm afraid. But there are ongoing events like that where we basically try to get folks together who aren't ordinarily in the room to talk about ways to think about innovation at scale. Later on this year, we are likely to be hosting a series of ongoing events that focus on pay for success, pay for performance, and government innovation, as well as topics of impact investing, including transaction cost reduction and other issues involving impact investing, both here and elsewhere off campus. Probably the easiest way to stay up to date on all that is just to keep checking the website or just sign up for the RSS feed on the website at impact.georgetown.edu. On an inward-facing basis, we have kind of an ongoing, we work whenever the opportunity permits with GSEI and with a number of the other centers around the campus, trying to find ways to create student opportunities that are essentially getting students into the same room with students from outside their main school. Right now, we're also offering a social innovation lab course. This semester, it's our first, it's an experiment, it's on a non-for-credit basis. In the fall, we hope to do it on a for-credit basis. It's open to students from across the campus, both graduate and undergraduate. This particular version of the class is, we're working with Ateneo University in the Philippines, which is running a school feeding program in the Metro Manila area in the Philippines, where they currently feed roughly 20,000 starving and wasting starving students in primary school every day. But the actual need just in the Metro Manila area is about 150,000 a day, and across the Philippines is more like 2 million a day. And so they were thinking about how to expand and scale that kind of program, and so they wanted to talk to us and work with us over time to think about how better to do that. So that has become the basis of how the students who are in the course think about designing policy and implementation solutions that can be scalable and what that might look like. So we're in the middle, actually just coming to the end of that first one. It's a wonderful opportunity for students who haven't focused on that kind of thing to do it in a real world context. In addition to that, we are, basically constantly offering, acting as sort of an intermediary for internship opportunities, for potential summer or longer-term employment opportunities for all the folks out in the community who come to us and say they need either research assistants or actual interns or actual full-time employees. Most of that shows up on the website, but occasionally that just shows up as a emailing, if it's kind of on an emergency basis, when stuff comes through the door. So if you're on the Beeck Center mailing list, you'll get all that stuff as it comes up. So, boy, that's kind of the basic background. I always hate to talk rather than answering questions because then I may not talk about anything you actually care about. So I can go ahead and discuss some more things specifically, or just ask, what is everybody up to? What is everybody interested in? Are there particular, I know that this is the Net Impacts group, so everybody's interested in going into, or at least thinking about going into careers in the social impact, social entrepreneurship, and related space when you're done with your MBA program. So what are you up against? What are the challenges you're seeing? What kind of opportunities do you already see so far in healthcare? What would that look like? What would you need more from a center on the campus that we could potentially help find alone and in combination with GSEI? And I'm just assuming, because I know that Melissa came and spoke recently, that everybody's totally familiar with and regularly interacts and engages with GSEI already. So, and if not,
Recognize some things.
Yeah. Is anybody not? Would you like to talk about GCI for just a second?
Oh, I don't want to steal the thunder by any means, but I think question time, absolutely, and I'm happy to contribute as needed, yeah.
so GSEI is the Global Social Enterprise Initiative embedded here in the business school. And LaDon is the executive director of the initiative, but there are a host of programs that the initiative offers to students and opportunities that the initiative offers to business students on kind of like a constant and ongoing basis. And Melissa, who is one of the professors at the business school, is deeply engaged and connected with the center and is constantly running the social change workshops that essentially interact and leverage off the center's outside activities as well.
That's Melissa Bradley, correct?
Melissa Bradley, yeah. Yep.
So I'd like to ask two questions.
Yes.
One would be for students that are interested in innovation but don't know how to engage, right? And they want to maybe find partners, and I think the Social Innovation Lab is something that you're created for that
Yes.
purpose. But are there opportunities for students here to directly engage already with things that you have going on? And the second question is that is there space available on campus for students that have a startup in social impact and want to work together? I mean, I'm in a startup right now. I'm trying, and my co-founder and I are always like struggling to just meet somewhere on campus. Healy, the library, and MSB. It'd be great if we could have a place where it's like, okay, I know I could go there and have some space.
So, totally love the second question. And the short answer is, I don't know. The center itself is a place where a bunch of students come in and constantly work with each other and essentially do lab time. Basically every evening there are students in there working on either their own projects or having meetings on stuff with outside folks. So it's intended to be an open space. I don't know if everybody has been in the Beeck Center yet. So it used to be a computer lab apparently on campus back in the day, and it's pretty big. It's about 2/3 the size of this room, and it's basically just a big co-working space with tables and whiteboards. So pretty much, if you're interested in finding a place to work and need somewhere to connect with your fellow entrepreneurs where it's quiet, just come on over and figure out when it would be a good time to plug in when something else is not going on. Sort of a calendar about when things are going on, so that would be perfect. Beyond that, what's the basic difference in the center between what the other activities are that are going around the campus on entrepreneurship generally? Because in this day and age, any entrepreneurship support program has a large component of social venture support, and there's a lot of opportunity here at the business school for getting support for business planning, fundamental engagement with VCs, learning how to grow and scale a social venture as well as a regular venture. One of the main things that we do over at the Beeck Center is for those who are trying to drive social change to think about how venture intersects with policy. And what that basically boils down to is the practice of how venture intersects with policy, not just the theory of how venture intersects with policy. So all of that outward-facing work, engaging with folks on the Hill about pay for success and pay for performance, attending convenings and working on research projects for those who are working on state and local solutions, all of that activity is intended to drive thought leadership, create convenings, and do this sort of local training around policy-driven social change. The opportunities for getting connected into that range from sort of research activities, which are kind of on an ongoing basis. Those kind of show up on a regular basis, but on any given day, I don't know which ones would be available, to participating in these convenings and soon helping to design and deliver some of this, what I'll call education writ broadly, but it's basically outward-facing executive education and nonprofit education. So we are interested, there's a lot of executive education that happens, especially out of the business school, much of which is incredibly good, effective, experiential education. But not everybody can afford to pay for what executive education costs at an institution like Georgetown. So we are thinking very extensively about what executive education looks like, as well as models for providing similar deep policy, experiential learning opportunities to those who can't otherwise pay and who can most benefit both here and globally. So that will be something that we're in the middle, that is something we're in the middle of trying to create now, and that we will need to be fleshing out and experimenting and iterating on an ongoing basis. Great question. Yes?
So you talked a little bit about the not-for-credit project that students are working on.
Yes.
Can you speak a little further to that and what you think the for-credit problem or project will look like in the fall?
So as with any, we are big fans of experimenting early, failing early, iterating, trying again, etc. What I would say is that we made a fundamental miscalculation in our early course, which was that it wasn't extensive enough. Meaning we figured it's not for credit, it's our first experimental course. We had 85 people sign up for roughly 20 spaces. So we knew there was a huge demand. But we figured because it's not for credit, we'll offer 7 sessions. We have them in the evenings, 2 hours every 2 weeks, basically 7 through the course of the semester. That turned out not to be enough. And the feedback we got from the students about halfway through was they wanted it to be way more often than that, at least once a week, if not more, and to have lots more lab time built in. So we've treated the course as a course in learning about development practice, personal leadership, design thinking, and storytelling as all part of the interacting with policymakers and others to create change opportunity. But you need to practice that. And what we ended up doing is spending a lot of time on conveying and learning about that, and not enough on the lab time. So we're trying to cram in a bunch of lab time before the end of the semester so that we can get that information out the door and keep interacting with Ateneo. I will say, the Beeck Center also sponsors students to go overseas, go all around the globe, actually, each summer for a 10-week experiential program called GU Impacts. This year, students are going to be going to China, 2 different programs in India, program in Peru, and also 6 students are going to Ateneo. And so they're going to be in the Philippines for 10 weeks working very intensively with Ateneo to sort of carry on this project of working on the feeding program. So that may not be exactly what the students were working on in the course, but hopefully it will build. And then in the fall, we'll continue to engage with Ateneo again to sort of see what that looks like. The whole real experiment here is, what does an ongoing engagement look like? And Ateneo is such a wonderful university that it's a great opportunity. So, did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, cool. So, I would say that we have, out of the roughly 20 to 23 students in the course, 3 or 4 are grad students, probably about 9 are SFS, maybe 10, and the rest come from the college, from the nursing school, and from elsewhere, one from the policy school, kind of all around the campus. So it's quite a mix.
And what were some specific activities that they did in the lab sessions?
So for many of the students, this was their first exposure to design thinking. And so we had Nadia Rumani of the D School from Stanford.
I took a class there, that's why I was asking.
Yes, and so Nadia came out and gave them a design session, and they learned their first kind of concept of learning how to empathize, learning how to engage with users, learning how to identify a user and to drill down on a problem to get out of the sort of difficulty of having too huge a problem to be able to actually do anything about it, and then to start to iterate and prototype. So they're currently in the middle of their prototyping sessions, and we have a Skype session we're arranging with Ateneo for this Thursday for them to start doing some more questioning after their first prototype.
If it's anything like that class, you guys should really publicize it because it was amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you went out and took a class
with the D
last year? Who was Nadia your professor?
No, I don't remember her name now, but it wasn't, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she was awesome. And she was here for several days. We also did a design session with a group of alums of this huge spectrum in ages. So some who've been out just 1 year, to others who've been out 35 years, but all of them live in the DC community. They came in on Saturday morning to do a design session as well about how to design an unconventional convening. And the specific challenge that we undertook was how to design a reunion which didn't feel like a reunion. And so it was just wonderful, and having all of them learn about what it actually means to engage in the design process was great. But one of the things we learned is that the design process, as it's taught at the D School, kind of ends with the design of a solution for a particular user. That's by design, part of the plan. But when you're thinking about solutions at scale, you need to think about systems change, as well as individual solutions building. And how the design process, the design thinking process intersects with systems change is, I think, something that we're going to be working on developing really extensively at Georgetown in the coming years. So it'll be I think it's a unique opportunity for Georgetown, especially as that intersects with values, a topic of ongoing conversation at the center and otherwise. So,
So internally at Georgetown, you were talking about some of the other groups that you're working with, some of the co-hosted events that you're running. How do you think we can collaborate even more? Because in terms of what groups are developing, what initiatives are being established, there seems to be a lot of overlap in the public policy, social awareness sector. I know that there's a brand new initiative at MSB here, that's Business Society and Public Policy. There's a Business and Public Policy Center, and those are two separate things in here, but they're working together. But a lot of what the Business Society and Public Policy Initiative is looking towards is where do those three entities intersect, how can they work better together, have a better awareness of each other. And it sounds like those also intersect with what you're doing, which intersect with McCourt's mission and a lot of what they're doing and a lot of the other smaller student groups. And so I'm just wondering, are we doing too much separately and not enough together where we're going to hit like a capacity distillation or whatever? And how can we better work together towards the common goal?
So I was in the private sector for many, many years. And then I worked in the federal government for the last 4 years before doing the work on the National Advisory Board and coming here. So this is my first experience in an academic environment. I thought, before I arrived, because what did I know, that a university was kind of an enterprise. That there was a single enterprise which had a kind of enterprise-wide view about what was happening, what was going on, and how all the different pieces interrelated. It looks to me, and maybe I have this wrong, but it looks to me as though a university is more of a place. It's got 4 virtual walls, and within that set of walls are all kinds of incredibly creative people working on problems and developing solutions. My former father-in-law used to say that ideas are like rain, they fall on 1,000 heads at the same time. I think that it is not unusual for people to be thinking about problems through similar lenses on a university campus, and to have solutions kind of bubble up organically, so 1,000 flowers seem to be blooming all the time. I think that's totally great, and there probably shouldn't be any, Big Brother-like effort to stop that from happening at the beginning. But there definitely should be an ongoing effort to coordinate those activities once they've bloomed. And so I think that this and probably other more technology-intermediated efforts should be underway to make sure that there's like a kind of a map of everything going on around the campus at any given time. So I still don't know everything going on around the campus on issues that are related to what we're doing. But I find that when folks start speaking to each other, they find ways to coordinate and collaborate. So, but I agree with you. Anything we can do to help outreach and to coordinate with others, happy to do. Totally. I agree. Do anybody else have a similar view about that, or is that not how everybody else looks at the campus?
Georgetown in particular I've worked at Harvard and I attended Tufts and worked there as a student. And every university is sort of its own little microcosm. And Georgetown, I think, is particularly siloed and spread out within the university structure. Tufts is a lot more centralized.
Okay.
It's also a little smaller. And Harvard is a weird hybrid of the two.
And very spread out. Yeah. Okay. So.
I'm basically here to understand what is impact investing, and when you kept talking about design thinking, it's curious, but I want to know what happened, especially with the Manila program. How much have you advanced, or what is, like, how do you keep objectives? Like, we all talk about like small term gains that motivate your team going forward even in design thinking.
So
what are any steps you can take forward?
With respect to Manila, it's the most important question. And the short answer is, I don't know the answer to that yet. Because, when we started out 9 weeks ago, essentially, we didn't know how much students, especially this broad selection of students, and especially including undergraduate students, would be able to work on solutions versus simply learning about how to think about starting to develop solutions. So there was a little bit of, is this going to be a consulting project which will lead to an implementable solution at the end, all kind of wrapped up in a bow and ready to go? Or even just a platform that the students going this summer can then implement in a more intensive way? Or is this going to be more about the process of learning than about a specific solution? I think what we've learned is that at least this first version of the course has been more about the process of learning, especially for undergrads. For many of them, it is their first exposure to thinking about a problem for which there is not a pre-templatized solution. And in fact, probably the single biggest learning we've had this semester is that it is excruciating for a number of students, and this is probably not unique to Georgetown, but it is excruciating for elite, highly effective, long and well-trained students to face a blank page problem with no solution to fill in. It has been excruciating. And so we've been going back and forth about that, trying to work through the process of developing solutions where there isn't one already there. And that has become kind of the primary focus of what we've been doing. Learning how to think about it through a design thinking model has been an incredibly effective framework to put around it. But to answer your other question, about impact investing, so there's a short answer and a long answer to everything. I'll just do the short answer. The short answer to impact investing is any effort to deploy capital in order to achieve a measurable and intended social return as well as a financial return. So it has to be intended, has to be measured or measurable in addition to the financial return. Within that incredibly broad definition, there is a huge range from those who are engaging in impact investments with an intention of achieving pure market returns on a risk-adjusted basis, and simply looking for opportunities to achieve impact when you can compare two different investments at the same rate of return for the same level of risk. So there's that end of the spectrum over here. You see a great deal of that kind of activity in the environmental space and clean tech space. That's where it's simplest to see that. In the middle of the spectrum, you have investors who are seeking to deploy capital in early stage social ventures with a venture level of risk and with a little bit of a lack of clarity about what the ultimate social return will be and how it interplays with the intended financial return. So for those kinds of investments, you have higher risk, much more ambiguity about the intended social impact as well as the financial return, but a tremendous effort to identify and measure and build some kind of area of practice around that middle. So there's a great deal of domestic and global social enterprise that falls in the middle of that spectrum. And then at the, by the way, much of that at the bottom of the pyramid where there are expectations of sustainable financial returns. I think at the far end, you have a great deal of philanthropic activity, which is intended to build capacity for later investable enterprise. So way at that end of the spectrum, you have many, many philanthropic entities that are engaging in program-related investments, and stop me if not everybody knows what I'm talking about, or other activities which are designed to get social enterprises familiar with how to work with an investor and how to think about sustainable financial returns but with a very explicit understanding that a lot of this is total tip of the spear investing with social enterprises that aren't yet familiar and don't have the capacity for engaging in sophisticated measurement and investment planning yet. So there's that huge spectrum. One of the issues that you will have out there in the world is that when you say impact investing, whoever you say that term to outside the business school will have a totally clear and rigid view about what it means, but you will have no way of knowing where on that spectrum they came from. So they're going to know that impact investing means philanthropic activity that looks like venture activity with no expected return. Or they're going to think that it means clean tech. Or they're going to think that it means social enterprise in the developing world, or something else. Or they may even think that it means affordable housing or economic development in low and moderate income areas, other areas that are also on that spectrum along the way. It just means that as you engage in that conversation with others, it's a conversation that needs to begin rather than just having everybody else start from a place of knowledge. When you are done and are out in the real world, you will know more about impact investing than 99.999% of the people out there, including in the investment space. And there will be a lot of assumptions that you'll need to correct. So, yes?
What's the best way that we can get involved with the center right now?
So, first and foremost, the easiest way is just to come by and to check the website. So, I think probably the simplest thing to do is to find out what research opportunities are up at any given time, what activities by way of ongoing projects or classes are being offered at any particular time, and what way we need to have folks volunteer and plug in. For example, we had a number of students meet with Jim Kim after his lecture. He came over from the World Bank and gave his lecture on climate change the other day. Some students met with him to talk about that issue afterwards. We have another delegation of students next week that are going to the World Bank to talk to them about their upcoming report on the internet and development. And they basically wanted to get some student engagement as they were coming up with their ideas for their proposal. We have stuff like that happens just kind of on a regular rolling basis. Often that shows up on the website. Some of them are so time specific that they just go out on the email list. But that's probably interesting. Sorry.
I'm going to ask a question. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the other entities, some of the specific entities that you've partnered with, or that you have plans to partner with. And if you could maybe mention in answering that some of the specific programs or agencies that you partnered with in the Pay for Success program. That kind of gets to the impact investing piece.
Okay, so impact investing, of course, is bigger than Pay for Success. It includes many more kinds of transactions than just Pay for Success transactions. But does everyone know what a Pay for Success transaction is? Because once again, I often find, I say this stuff and some of the folks in the room go this and some of the folks in the room do this. So Pay for Success transactions mostly take the form of what are called social impact bonds currently. A social impact bond is not a bond. It is completely misleading in terms of name, but it's an awesome brand that has succeeded in kind of generating buzz over the last year. Basically what they are transactions to fund social interventions that we know work, but that for whatever reason, a public entity can't fund. But that if it could fund, would actually save much more money by spending the money up front than by trying to deal with problems after the fact. So a typical example is there are all kinds of interventions that prevent those who go into prison from recidivating after they come out. We know that the cost of engaging in those interventions is relatively low, but that the cost of having somebody end up back in prison is enormous by comparison. So about 5 years ago in the UK first, Sir Ronald Cohen and others, basically former venture investors, came up with the idea of, since for political and other reasons, the state can't fund these early interventions to provide services for recent inmates, what if the private sector funds it? And rather than doing it on an annual basis where you're constantly worried about getting funding for the next year, what if they fund an intervention for 5 years on an ongoing basis so that there will be time to do it and to do it right? And what if you get a third party, utterly independent, to come in and measure and evaluate whether or not the intervention has in fact created the intended outcome and the intended savings for the public entity. What if you could do all of that, and if the outcome and the savings were verified, you would know exactly how much money was saved, because you'd know how many people were diverted from the system, and you would then split that afterwards in some way between the investors and the public entity. That most basic idea of the public sector partnering with the private sector to fund these interventions and then to share the savings at the end of the day, if indeed there are verified savings, has exploded in kind of application and success, and they are being applied not just in the prison recidivism context, but in the asthma intervention and prevention context, in the early childhood reading context, in homelessness abatement, in a whole host of areas where basically we know things work, and we know that when they're done right and funded sustainably, they have just a huge impact, and where you need this to kind of make that thing occur. There are lots of opportunities for those in the investment sector to start to think about it and understand how these transactions are starting to take place. So we work with the intermediaries in the sector who are pulling together these funders as well as state and local entities in order to structure these transactions. We're going to be having a little convening at the center essentially in the next month or so to prepare for a much larger convening during the course of the summer about transaction cost reduction, the risks facing that market, how to do a better job of gathering large funds to deploy for this purpose. In other words, how to do market infrastructure building and that sort of thing. So on Pay for Success, we work with the folks who are building the markets, and we are up on Capitol Hill speaking to the various folks who are promoting legislation in Congress to authorize this kind of transaction in order to make that more effective and to help kind of move those processes forward. So just so you'll know, it's an incredibly simple idea, but in actual practice, it can be quite complicated because many state and local entities, and indeed federal entities as well, often don't have the authority to enter into contracts that go over 4 or 5 years. And don't have the authority today to make a promise to pay something 5 years from now if an intended outcome is achieved. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, but often entities operate at the state and local level and at the federal level, public entities, on a year-by-year funding basis. And so you often need to change the way we think about funding in order to allow this sort of thing to happen. So intervening in the policy space, working with those who are doing the market intermediation, working to help educate those in the funder space and in the nonprofit space who are engaging in this activity. That's kind of all the different ways to plug in. So, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So lots of activity on that area. So, and I apologize, there are so many, this is a jargon-rich space, an acronym and jargon-rich space. And so I try whenever possible to break apart and decode some of that stuff. So I apologize if I lapsed. So,
in terms of scalability, what are some of the big obstacles you see, early stage companies running into pretty often, and how can they avoid them starting up?
So when we talk to folks in the investment community, they say there's this huge pent-up demand for those who have and control pools of capital, either their own capital or capital of others that they control, to deploy it in the service of social returns, social and environmental returns, as well as a financial return. But there are just no investable deals. You can't find any investable deals. They're too small, or there just aren't enough of them. And then when you speak to social enterprises, they say, the only thing we lack is growth capital. There are thousands of us starting, many of them are here, and there's just nobody with dough. And the pools of dough are so small at this point and so specialized that we can't even find them, or when we do find them, they're already fully subscribed. So this bridge between those who have money and those who have enterprises, and the capacity building on the enterprise side, and the knowledge, awareness creation, and fund accumulation on this side is kind of the key goal, the key work of the next 5 years. Well underway. But that's the key work in the next 5 years. and probably the key barrier to, key obstacle to scalability. So what is everybody planning to do when they get out? Is everybody just going to go work for a consulting firm or an investment bank? Or any social enterprises going to be started?
Just curious, what do your friends in Manila expect out of a partnership with our center? Like, are they expecting something tangible? Are they waiting for you to interpret?
They have a very long view. And they view this as a problem that they're going to be working on in the Philippines for years. And so what they've said is, we have many needs for scaling. They have ongoing connections into the federal government of the Philippines, and there's significant interest in preparing federal legislation to authorize and fund the expansion of these kinds of feeding programs all around the Philippines. So they want help in engaging with policymakers. Many local mayors don't want to wait for the federal government, and they want to get started on local programs. They want help in a really operational, very specific kind of accreditation and local certification way to have very effective local programs that can just set up locally and not wait for federal legislation. But there are huge issues with lack of capacity, potential corruption, and other things which they think can be addressed by a robust certification and accreditation program. So they want help creating that. They want help creating commercials, media outreach, and other ways to help spread the word effectively so they can get the story of this huge problem, not just out into Manila, but across the Philippines and across the world. And they want to have more exposure of how effective the work is that they are doing. And they want to help iterating. They want to set up one of their local kitchens, one of their central kitchens as a test kitchen to test different ways to scale. Right now, the program is feeding 20,000 kids a day based almost entirely on volunteer labor. Almost all of the work of cooking the food, preparing the food, distributing the food out to the nearby schools, and then putting the food in the nearby school in containers and serving it, and then cleaning up and doing it all the next day, is done by volunteers, mostly moms and grandmas. They have said, because this is what their research has shown, that paying volunteers or hiring professional staff will put a wooden stake through the heart of the program and it will never work. That's hard for us to understand and to kind of wrap our arms around. So when you think about scaling, how do you scale to 2 million meals a day based on a volunteer workforce? But it is a feature of the Philippines that is a powerful network for potential expansion. So learning how to bridge that particular cultural and other divide is one of the main things that the students work on, and it's one of the things that they want help on. Basically saying, we don't want anybody to tell us how to scale up, we just want you to help us with these other pieces that we can use as we start to scale. So, and they say we don't care about it being done by the end of the semester, we just want to work with you on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
Actually, all of us in the same class, me, Megan, Surabhi, and so we're just talking about a recent case on policy in business. We're talking about whether it's cultural, what are the main factors. So it was interesting to hear how you said that they're not paying volunteers and the culture is holding them together. But you also talked about whether it's scalable. But I was thinking if they could have come from 2 people to 20,000 people, like how much have they started with? So they've still scaled up.
So I don't know how many small businesses everybody has interacted with. I've done a lot of mentoring of small businesses. Every small business can scale up to the point where the owner and entrepreneur in charge of the business finally explodes. But there's a lot of expansion you can do right up to that point where you're just this side of where the owner explodes. By the way, that is not optimal. But that's exactly what's happened in Ateneo. So there is a woman at Ateneo named Carmela who is a force of nature and who has gone from 400 a day to 4,000 a day to 20,000 a day, essentially entirely by personally managing this program at 5 districts around Manila. So she just makes this happen. But she basically has said, we are now at the point where I can't control and make sure that everything is running fairly and effectively as we move into Mindanao, as we move into the areas affected by Typhoon Haiyan, as we move into other areas of the country that are clamoring for a similar program. So she said, what do we do? So yes, I think that's how they've done it so far, and it hasn't been by professionalizing or templatizing, if I can make up a word, the program yet. It's been by just sheer force of will. But it's amazing that one person in sheer force of will can feed 20,000 students a day, day after day after day in the Philippines.
Maybe that's what empowers her.
Hmm?
Maybe that's what motivates her.
Yes,
Every other child.
yes. So,
Well, I think we're nearing the end of our session here. Thank you very much for coming in. This has been
it's my pleasure.
really interesting.
It's my pleasure. So anytime anybody has any more questions, just come on over and say hello or shoot us an email. And let's figure out ways to coordinate ongoing efforts with GSEI and also all across the rest of the campus. I think all of us can do a better job of that. And, you know, good luck, all of you, as you get out and decide how you're going to change the world afterwards. This is sort of the core of the world changers in the business school, so it's awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody.